gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
There we go. Good evening and welcome to Believe in the Journey. Y'all, I had myself muted tonight, trying not to over talk while the intro was going. But anyway, welcome to Believe in the Journey, season 3, episode 2. So, you guys have missed me. I know it's okay. I'm good. I'm back now. So, I have a wonderful guest tonight, Mr. Paul Hooper, and he has a true story of resilience and triumph, and you are going to love what we talk about tonight. But before we do anything, we have to go to God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together as you do each and every time we are in front of you. Let the words of my mouth fall upon the ears that need to hear, and let whatever we talk about tonight fall upon the ears that need to hear. Let this be encouragement to each and every person that listens tonight. Let them take away what they need and pass it along to someone else, even if they feel as if they cannot use it. Everything that we do is because of you. Every trial, every tribulation, every victory is all because of you. Every single step that we take is intentional to the purpose in which you have created us. I thank you for this moment. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest here, Mr. Paul Hooper. He has faced some of life's darkest moments, yet he did not give up. Along the way, he turned his passion for fitness into a thriving business. But we don't get to talk to him about his journey. So, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I thank you for coming and being all the way on the other side. It's 11 a.m. where you are on Friday.
It
We
is.
ain't got the
It is.
Friday yet.
The sun is shining.
Well, it's all dark over here and cold. So, you know, I got my little warm, fuzzy socks on, trying to stay warm while we talk. But introduce yourself to the guest, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, but we're just going to have a regular little conversation.
Sounds great. Sounds amazing. Well, yeah, I'm a 46-year-old father of 3 and husband. I've been in the health and fitness industry for just 10 years. Second marriage, so obviously that's what my story is about. But at the moment, I'm living life to the fullest. I love my job. I love my family. And I couldn't be in a better place at the moment.
Well, that is also a good thing, good place to be because everything is wonderful. Now, you mentioned this is your second marriage. Tell me a
Yes,
little bit about your first marriage.
absolutely. So I got married the first time around in the early 2000s,
Mhm.
2005.
Okay.
Um, it was after a very short relationship. So upon reflection, I've considered that period of time. I was still very immature in life, not a
Okay.
lot of life experience. So decisions were sort of made based on emotion rather than logic, and I kind of
Okay.
that decision as well. So yeah, we'd only been together for a very short space, less than a year, and the marriage went a long period of time. Like it went over 10 years. So
Okay.
we had a child. So that's obviously a huge positive to come from it. But it
Yes.
did well. to say the least. We ended up getting divorced not long after that 10-year period. So.
Okay.
Um,
What led to you getting a divorce?
so she was unfaithful, to put it
Okay.
bluntly, and it wasn't your typical sort of, back then there wasn't a lot of dating apps and all that sort of stuff. So
Right.
technology hadn't evolved to what it is today. Um, but she was unfaithful in a way that was incredibly deceptive. She was
Hmm.
unfaithful in a way that gaslit me a lot.
Oh.
It made me feel like I was the problem a lot of the time. And this went on for a good couple of months.
Okay.
and it basically got to a point where the intuition in me felt that something was wrong. So I actually had to
Mhm.
hire a private investigator to determine what was actually happening and get to the bottom of the issues, because it was just going to continue. And looking back on it now, it's just going to continually be a a situation where I was constantly being blamed for my insecurities about our marriage. Yet she was the one that was obviously off doing other things. So yeah, it wasn't a fun time to go through. That's for sure.
Mm. Definitely. I can definitely relate to being married and divorced myself.
Mm.
Um, we were actually high school sweethearts,
Oh wow.
and we have 3 children together. And we grew apart more than likely, more or less, I'll say it that way, but it was more upon the fact of his selfishness. He put himself above the safety of our children, and that was the final straw for me. And it was just like, okay, it's time for me to take our children and go. And even down to the day that we moved out, and moved to a new house, new space, he was still more concerned with what was going to happen to him than the reason why we were no longer together.
Mm.
um, you said it was a short courtship basically before you got married. How old were you when you got married?
Good question. So 2005, I would have been in my mid 20s.
Okay.
So yeah, in my opinion, relatively young from I guess, a mature perspective.
Hmm.
But I guess, the way things sort of work over here, or did over here, is, the social expectation was you finished high school, you either started a career or you went to university, you'd meet someone, you know get married,
Yeah.
buy a house, have a family. That was sort of the process and the
Okay.
expectation from previous generations. So that's kind of the path I went down, but it obviously didn't pan out the way it should have. And look, upon reflection now, I'm
Hmm.
actually quite grateful for having gone through that period, even though it was, some of the hardest times in my
Yeah.
life, because now I can appreciate what I've got now.
Yeah.
I've got a wonderful wife, I've got an amazing family, I've got a great career, all of which wouldn't exist if I didn't sort of take the steps I did.
Yeah, I truly believe, as we were talking earlier, is that you have to go some of the darkest moments and toughest times in order for you to actually appreciate the things that you have now. One thing that I know for myself, and you can agree or disagree with this, is that in those dark moments, you don't really know if you're going to come out of those really quickly, because it's like, how did I get here? Why is this happening? I don't understand. I don't feel like this is right. Like, I wasn't a bad person to this person. Why would they do this to me?
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, God, what is it that you're trying to teach me in this moment? Because this doesn't feel right, and you
Mm.
don't feel like you're gonna get out of it. You start to go down a path of, you may turn to drugs and alcohol to try to cope with what you're dealing with, the betrayal of other people that you truly believed and thought that they loved you in the manner in which you love them, and it is not the same. um I know that's how I felt when I was dealing with what I was dealing with when my marriage was ending. And it's a hard space. And but you got to take that hard look at yourself. So did you ever take the hard look at self to say, okay, well, I did play a part in this, or was it all on your ex-wife?
That's a good question. I did. There was obviously a lot of reflection, but it took a while to actually get to that point, just simply because I was so devastated with the fact that, my marriage had gone down this path. We had a
Hmm.
daughter that I had to worry about as well. But upon reflection, look, it was a tough one, because I think, you always ask the question: could you have done more? Could you have been better? And
Yeah.
through the early stages, before I actually established what was going on, that's what I was doing. I was making so much effort because I felt it was my problem. I felt it was,
Hmm.
But in hindsight, it obviously wasn't. So, to answer your question, I don't think I needed to do anything more. No. A typical marriage obviously has its ups and downs. There's always
Yeah.
going to be bumps in the road, but you work through it together because you're a team. This wasn't the case in this situation.
Mhm.
She chosen her path and she went down it, and left me sort of in the wake. So I wasn't necessarily not doing enough. I feel whether it was being not enough, being enough present, or trying to be more intimate, or whatever the case may be. She simply made a decision based on where she was in her life, and that's how it panned out.
I definitely understand that. It's one of those things where I know for me, it was a self-reflection that after our, separation, I did a long, hard, look at myself. I did a list of my strengths and my weaknesses, and then I did, a list of things where I felt like I could have done better, and I could have, because for me, I know sometimes I'm not a very patient person when it comes to stupidity, so to speak. And so I've had to learn that just because it's stupid to me doesn't mean it's stupid to someone else. So I've
Mm.
had to learn to work on that. And I'm still working on my tone in which I ask questions of my significant other, because sometimes my tone is harsh to some people when I am asking questions. And I ask questions most of the time for clarity and understanding.
Mm.
And having a person who isn't used to being questioned will get defensive because they're not used to being questioned. And so I've had to learn in this dating situation how not to be so forceful with my tone when I'm just asking for clarity. Um, now, has that been something you've had to work on with yourself about being less tactful or direct but not harsh?
Look, yeah, absolutely. You learn a lot from obviously, a marriage and being with someone exclusively. But as I mentioned earlier, it took me a while to sort of. It was almost like someone had died. I had to go
Mhm.
through the mourning
Yeah,
process first, and then my
yeah.
wall was very much up. Um, and I was convinced that I was never going to get married again. I thought, no, I'm done with it. I don't believe in it. If this is the experience, I don't want anything to do with it. But it's amazing how over time and obviously healing and some inner work, you can change the way you think. And then obviously when my now wife came along,
Mhm.
everything just changed. So I did have to do a lot of work to obviously let her in and trust her, and that was obviously my own insecurities at the time. But it certainly panned out really well, and we're here. We've been married now 7 and a bit years. So
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
it's been good. Thank
congratulations.
you. Yeah, yeah, it's really good.
Now, what were some of the things that you did on your healing journey before you met your now wife?
Mm. Look, fitness was a massive thing. Back then, it wasn't my career, but I still was a regular attendance to it. I went to a gym regularly. I played some sport. So the gym itself, it was almost like therapy for me.
Oh,
It was a way to sort of get rid of some negative energy. It was a way to make myself feel good. It was a positive environment every time you walked in there, so that had a strong influence on me as well. Because look, at the end of the day, I was in a really dark place when that
yeah.
marriage ended. To the point where suicide was a serious consideration. So the gym was a regular constant. It was something that gave me purpose every day to go to, and I made that commitment to myself, and that was something that got me through. And now, obviously, has turned into a career for me. So it was very much a path that I didn't realize I was taking, but upon reflection, it very much you know basically changed my life.
It's one of those things that you don't realize that is your saving grace in those
Mm.
moments? You know, my saving grace during my journey has been writing, and that has led to what I do now, and
Yep.
that is help authors, you know, write books according to their journeys. And never did I imagine I'd be in the middle of like talking to people, doing a podcast or anything like that. But it's the path. It's those things that you don't think you're gonna need or you're gonna be good at. But one of the things that you tend to do is go to where you find peace and where you find comfort. And the gym was your peace and your comfort, and it allowed you to release the feelings that you were dealing with in a way that was not only healing to your body, but healing to your mental as well. And it allowed you to have a softer space when it was time for you to actually meet your wife.
Mm.
And how did you guys meet?
Ironically, I know I mentioned this at the start, but a dating app, believe it or not. Like,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, after being married for such a long period of time, the
Hmm.
dating world had changed so much in that time. Dating apps were
Absolutely.
just coming through. People weren't meeting in traditional ways anymore. So I didn't know what to do, and I felt that it was time to start meeting people. So I you know, set up an account on one of these dating apps, and lo and behold, she popped up. So yeah, I guess the rest is history from that
Did
perspective.
you
But
or
it was
did
really
you
strange.
ask her out first or did she ask you out?
That's a good question. I don't remember. We had we had lengthy conversations initially, so we were back and forth, just sort of
Okay.
learning about each other, and then I think I probably did, I would say, to suggest that we meet and go for dinner. But I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I don't remember. You probably have to ask her.
Oh goodness. Well, we could definitely ask her, but it obviously went very well because now she's your wife.
Yeah, 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 that's exactly right. It went very well. We had several dates. Yeah, it just seemed right at the time. It felt
Mhm.
really good. The energy was really good. The connection was really good, and yeah, we hit it off really really well. We had a lot of similarities, a lot of things in common, so it just worked out really well.
Well, it's good that you were able to open up your heart and allow her in.
Mm.
Now, do you feel like she had to do a lot of work to get you to gain her trust and letting your guard down to be soft and gentle in a way that only she can bring that side out of you?
Absolutely. I definitely had walls up early on.
Mhm.
It took a while for us to sort of talk at a deeper level and
Mhm.
communicate from that perspective rather than just sort of surface level stuff. I initially
Mhm.
told her, and I was upfront about it, that I didn't want to get married. I put that out there straight away, just so we didn't go too far down the path in case that was a deal breaker for her. Uh,
Mhm.
but ironically, I having spent a lengthy period of time together, knew that I did want to marry her. It was just a matter of when. So yeah,
Mhm.
that was certainly the case. But no, my walls were up, and the trust side of things just came naturally.
Mhm.
I felt really comfortable in her presence. I felt really comfortable talking to her openly. It wasn't too long within the relationship before I told her about my previous marriage and how it all unfolded. And ironically, her story was somewhat similar too, because she'd been previously married as well. So there was a bit of a connection from that perspective. So that made things a lot easier as well.
Okay, I definitely can see where that plays a major part in a connection. But this is a question that I always want to ask men when it comes to selecting their partner, their wife. Um, do you guys feel like when your spouse brings you peace is when you can really relax and be the truer form of yourself and not being so hard and tough outside of home. Home
Mm.
is where you can actually be soft and gentle, but yet still be firm. but do you feel like when you meet that woman, she brings out that version of you of being that softer, um, not necessarily a teddy bear, but being soft and gentle in that sense?
That's a good question. I guess because of my age, I've grown up in an environment and a family where the males were the lead. They were the you know the alpha of the family. So
Mhm.
I always assumed that role. But I guess in our relationship now, she's such a calming influence, and we have a collaborative sort of marriage. I don't have to be the decision maker all the time. I don't have to be the disciplinarian all the time. We can very much sort of sit on an even keel when it comes to all that sort of thing. So that's been a bit of an adjustment for me over the time we've been together.
Okay.
But it's also been a nice one as well. It sort of allows me to be more, I guess, centered, more emotional, more balanced, I suppose, rather than just assume that I've got to be
Yeah.
that male. Yeah.
Well, the other question is, do you feel like I hear a lot of the 50-50,
Mm.
in relationships. I don't necessarily think that relationships are 50-50. I feel like you give 100% of yourself and your partner gives 100%, but you may not always have 100% to give. But if you're working together, you feel where the other person isn't so full in that moment. And that helps you to build and grow and communicate together. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. Look, it's it's very much dependent on circumstance. It's very much dependent on your environment. If you're carrying a lot of load in terms of stress and things like that, then the other person generally picks up the slack. So it may not always be 50-50. It may be 60-40. It may be 70-30. There's always going to be a spread of responsibility from one to the other, just depending on where people are in life.
Yeah.
Um, there's no such thing as the perfect marriage, in my opinion. You've got to obviously work on it, and you've got to carry emotional load in some instances where the other one might be having to carry financial load or family load or whatever it is. So yeah, it is a balancing act, but that's what makes it so great is that you can work together to refine it and improve it.
We got a question on here. We have a few congratulations also for your new marriage. And this question is being asked: do you ever really get over the pain of being cheated on?
That's a good one. At this point in time, I would say I am,
Hmm.
but it's taken a long time. Even though I obviously opened up and got remarried and things like that, I still had relapses in terms of anxiety because I still have to communicate with my daughter's mum, my
Hmm.
ex-wife, because of our daughter. My
Yeah.
daughter's 17, so she's still in school. So we still have to make collective decisions around that, and just doing that and communicating with her is quite challenging at times. It's
Yeah.
gotten easier as time has progressed, but in the early stages, it was really tough. I would often recourse. I would often not want to communicate with her. So it was really challenging, but over time, it's gotten a lot better, and I'm comfortable to say now, I'm pretty much done in terms of that whole episode.
Definitely relate to it being tough
Yep.
in that situation, because having to communicate with the other partner when the kids are small and things need to get done, the
Mm.
other party is not always receptive of what needs to be done. It was definitely a challenge for me in the sense of not wanting to try to force him to be a father,
Yep.
but to let him know that you still have a responsibility to these three children. And yes, you may have moved on with a new relationship, and that woman has children, but you created three over here that need you just as much as these other children that don't have a connection to you in that sense. And so that was more so of my battle and my situation. We got another question. How do you keep your emotions from the past marriage from interfering in your new marriage?
That's another good question. Look, communication is very, very important. I think the fact that I did open up early with my now wife, early in our relationship, about what had previously happened gave her a lot of transparency.
Hmm.
It made her understand where I was at, both made her aware of where I was emotionally, and there's still been periods where I've had to sort of, I've seen a psychologist from time to time just to keep on top of things.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the emotional baggage that I took out of that previous marriage was quite heavy. It was traumatic. It was devastating. It took a lot to get over it. So every now and then, there's going to be moments that may pop up from time to time that I have to manage. But because my relationship with my current wife is so strong and she's fully aware of everything that I've been through, she's very open in terms of me talking to her about it. She's really grounded in terms of her logic and the way she thinks. So that always helps. So I think if you are in a new marriage, it's the communication that is very key in terms of managing any old sort of trauma or emotions that may pop up from time to time.
I definitely agree with that. Having open lines of communication, no matter how hard the conversation may get, you have to have the hard conversations. And I think most of the time we try to avoid them because
Mm,
we don't want to upset our partner. But if you don't talk to them about what you're feeling, how can they help you navigate what you're feeling? And sometimes it's a trigger of something from the past that they may have said something that is, upsetting. Like, it was a relationship that I was in probably about 4 years ago, and a situation came up where a friend of mine was visiting, and the gentleman that I was dating didn't like that I had male company. But this was a friend for me from high school and had been with me during a moment of sickness, for me. And so instead of him talking to me about it, he talked to everyone else and said how angry he was at it. And then it was like, when I confronted him about him talking to everyone else instead of talking to me, it was like, well, you did something that my ex did and that triggered me. And I said, well, how would I know that? That was never a conversation that was brought up or discussed, because this, your ex had a whole male in her bed. This was not the case in
mm,
my situation. He was in my house, but my children and everyone was there, and we were having a conversation. No one was undressed or anything. Everybody was fully clothed, children in the room and everything. But he was triggered by the fact that there was another male outside of him being there. So it was his own insecurities that he projected onto me. And it was like, that had nothing to do with me, but you made it my fault because you didn't express what you had been through. And I feel like uncommunicated expectations ruin a lot of relationships, because if you don't express what it is that is a deal breaker for you, number one, if you have unresolved trauma or triggers that you don't express to your partner, how can they know if what they have said or done is upsetting to you if you've never told them? You
mm.
know, it's a hard thing, and it's a hard space to be when you don't have that open line of communication of, this is what happened to me when I was at this age, or this happened to me when this was going. And it's like, okay. eh. And we got another question. Does your wife get along with your ex-wife, and how does that make you feel?
Um, they've certainly tried for our daughter's sake. My ex-wife is very, look, I don't want to paint a terrible picture of her, but she's still a very bitter woman.
Hmm.
So my current wife certainly made attempt. We've caught up several times in terms of managing my daughter through, the younger years in life and things like that. Um, yeah, it's challenging right now. No, to answer the question openly, she doesn't. It's not that she doesn't get along. There's just no communication. Most of it's through me, but at the same time, my daughter's 17 now, so she's basically an adult. So we
Yeah.
converse with directly with her. But they were never going to be friends. Just different personalities, different people in general. Like in a perfect world, that would be ideal because it would mean that everyone's getting along and there's no conflict. But yeah, it didn't end up that way at all.
I hate when it's those type of situations, but it just goes to show that there's still a lack of maturity, to where you can't get along, and I look at it like this: when the relationship between the two parents, when there's kids involved, at the end of the day, you got to put your pride to the side and do what's best for the children. Now, if
Yep.
you want to have an argument off to the side, outside, away from the kids, that's fine, but
Yep.
don't put the kids in the middle of it because they have absolutely nothing to do with it. You know, the angry dads are sometimes bitter too. Men are bitter and women are usually a lot bitter because they don't want to admit that they played a major part in the downfall of the relationship.
Mm.
There's a lot of women that just want to blame the man but never take any accountability for their own actions. And when I look at it like this, when the woman doesn't want to take accountability for her actions, it just means that it's easy for her to place the blame than accept accountability. And it's like, okay, but he didn't do this by himself.
Mm.
You did something that made him leave, but you won't admit to what you did. So you blame him completely. You have to take that mirror and turn it back on yourself and say, okay, I did this.
Yep.
And if you're able to do that, that is where your growth is always going to begin. But it starts with accountability and not denial. But some people like to live on denial street forever. I'm
They
just
do.
not one of them people. You know, you can't heal from what you don't acknowledge, and if you want a wound to heal, you gotta have to recognize that it's there and then
Mhm.
start taking the steps to heal from that. What advice would you give to someone that is in the middle of like uncertainty of staying or leaving,
Mhm.
because it seems more painful to stay in a situation than it is to leave, but it would be better if you were to leave, for the sake of mental safety, physical safety, just clarity all the way around. What advice would you give?
That's a good question. It's very dependent on the on case by case. For
Mhm.
me, I tried to stay. Like we went and saw marriage counselling. Obviously we had a daughter, so that was a big reason. But I
Yeah.
ended up having to make the tough call to leave because it was too toxic and it just became too untenable to stay there. So I think just getting all your cards on the table, having some hard conversations are definitely worthwhile. This is where I'm at. This is what I think. Sometimes that can be to the benefit of the relationship, and sometimes it can be at the detriment. But it's got to be done. Otherwise, you're just avoiding what is potentially going to happen anyway,
Right.
and a potentially nastier sort of situation. So at least with honesty, you can get to the root of the problem straight away, and then make some decisions around that. I think.
Yeah, I agree with you on that because it's gonna be a hard conversation, and nobody really likes to have those hard conversations, but the hard conversations are necessary to get you to say, okay, we tried to make this work, and maybe we're better as friends than we are being in a relationship together. And
Yep.
sometimes that is where we need to understand that it doesn't mean that neither one of us are bad people. It just means that we're not good together. And we
That's
have to figure out how to coexist, especially for the sake of the child if there are children involved. And it's okay if you're not together to be in a space of where You're both at peace. You're not at war with each other. You're not doing all of the back and forth, the bickering, and putting the child in the middle of trying to pick the side of, I want to be with mom, I want to be with dad, I want to do this and I want to do that. And that's truly not fair to the kid because they're like, I love you both.
Yeah, of course.
Choose, you know? And so your daughter, she's 17 when me and my ex-husband got went through our separation. Our oldest was 13, so 13, 7, and 5, I believe. So around in that area. Um, it was it was it was hard. I will
Mm,
um but I was at peace because I did a lot of crying and everything before I
yep.
finally had had enough. And it was like I was tired of hearing the same argument over and over again. And it's like you're not changing the behavior. So, like you were saying, the gaslighting in
Yep.
the relationship, that's what it was. And it was the manipulation. And it's like, okay, if I'm complaining to you about something and then you try to, you say you're sorry, you do a little bit to make it better, but as soon as you think that I've forgotten about the reason why I wanted you to change this behavior, you go back to
Mm,
doing the same thing again. So it's like, am I really the crazy one in this situation? Or, and so that was what it was. And so it was like, yeah, it's best that we go our separate ways because it's not benefiting either one of us. And the major straw for me was he put our children in jeopardy.
yeah.
um
Well.
and it was just like, okay, this is not gonna work because you are thinking more of self versus putting the welfare of our children in front of what it is for a parent to do. Because as a parent, you're gonna make the sacrifices for your children.
Mm,
You're gonna do what is right for them, even if, let's say, you may not have enough food for everybody to eat. Instead of taking all the food for yourself, you're going to make sure your children eat and you're going to go to bed hungry. That's what it means to sacrifice for your children. And that was not the sense that he was. And it was like, okay, I got to think about me first. No, no, no. You got little ones that you have to think about. You have to put them, somewhere in that equation. And that was never a thing for him, But now we are in a space where I can be in the same room with him and talk and not be like, I want to smack you upside your head or anything like that. So it did take us some time to get to that space where I didn't even want to be in the same room with him.
yeah.
But eventually I got over that because it was like, I can't be upset with you because you got to deal with your own stuff and you got to get with how you need to get through whatever it is. And you may be fighting a battle that you never even talked to me about. So there's no reason for me to hold this against you. Let me just let this go and learn to get along with you because him and I were friends before we were anything else. And so now we have gotten back to the space where we are actually friends because we can still laugh and joke. I'm still gonna
Yep.
call him stupid, but I mean, it just is what it is. But I don't do it behind his back anymore. I
Yep.
just tell him, face to face, you're stupid.
Mm.
And he knows why I'm saying it because he may have done something or said something that was stupid, and he was like, "I knew you were gonna say that." So it's not like one of those things where I hate to see him coming or anything like that, but we get along now. And it did take us some time to get to that space. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that he was able to give me our three children, because without that relationship, I wouldn't have them. And they are one of my greatest accomplishments. And I love them. Sometimes they think that they're my parents now. Um, so that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day because
Mhm.
they now tell me that I am a difficult parent to raise because I'm hard-headed and I don't listen to them. So you have a 17-year-old, just prepare yourself for her to start telling you these same things, asking you when you're gonna be home, why are you going here, why are you
Yeah,
doing that? Because they tend to think that they become the parent after a certain age.
sure.
So just prepare yourself because it's coming. What would you like to leave our guests with? Any advice?
Oh, I think when look upon reflection with my first marriage, obviously it was very much rushed. I was very emotionally immature. So I think whenever you're entering a courtship for the first time, or you've been in it for a period of time, and you feel like you want to maybe go down the marriage path, just make sure you've given it the appropriate time. You've had the deep conversations. You've experienced life together in terms of challenging periods, traveling, finance, all these sorts of things, to give yourself a holistic approach of how it looks. I think that's definitely one thing. And I think from my perspective, health and fitness has been a massive part of my life through tough times and through good times. So if you've got a constant activity, or whether it's reading a book or going for walks, keep it up. Even on the days that you just don't feel like doing it. You're depressed, you're sad, you're anxious, you want to crawl up in bed and eat, a box of cookies or whatever the case may be. Keep up that discipline in terms of what you're doing for the physical attributes of it, because they do make you feel good. So that's important as well.
Okay. Where can they reach you if they want some fitness advice?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Instagram. So my business name is Paul's Body Engineering. So you can find me, Paul's Body Engineering, one word, on Instagram, on Facebook. I've got a YouTube channel as well, and my website, which is paulsbodyengineering.com. So it's pretty easy to find, and I've got a lot of free content out there. So plenty of advice in relation to all sorts of goals that you may have as well.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely gonna be looking at more of those because, like I told you, I gotta get this stuff together. But I've just been hard headed and having a flare up with this asthma and having to
Mm.
use that rescue inhaler because I think I'm, as my kids say, I think I'm grown when I'm not. That's where it comes into play because they're quick to say, "Now, yeah, I told you weren't supposed to be doing all that anyway, and now look at you over there, can't breathe." So I'm gonna take it easy and not be so hard headed, but
Mm.
I'm still gonna be hard headed in some aspects. Um, One other question before I let you go:
Of course.
do you feel as if the next chapters with your wife are going to be some of the best that you've ever experienced because you're still letting your guard down and you are open to having those hard conversations because it's going to get better with time? Do you have that feeling?
100% I do. Yeah, absolutely. The next period of time for us is very exciting. It's also a little bit daunting because our kids are getting older. They're going to leave school. They're going to start their own lives. So we'll have, obviously, the empty nest scenario, but that opens the door for us to travel more, to experience life in a different capacity. And that's really exciting. We still have the deep conversations. We still have the tough conversations. I'm still very much pig-headed at times, but as a team, if you will, we tackle things together, and I think that's what's going to make it really enjoyable.
Well, that is good. I am glad to hear that. It gives me hope. I am in the middle of about to take a new transition where I'm going to be away from my kids in a different state. So, this is definitely a thing for me where I have been battling my fight or flight mode,
Mm,
and it's like, ugh, do I run or do I sit and
yeah.
actually figure this out? So that's where I'm at with this. What advice would you give me on that, just to pace myself, be easy on myself and not so hard and not run away because it's different.
Well, without change, there comes no change, right? So,
Yeah.
I guess I've always lent on a question whenever I've had a difficult decision to make in regards to
Mhm.
life or anything else, and that is, what's the worst thing that can happen? So if you ask yourself that regarding the decision you've got to make,
Mhm.
I'm sure you'll come to the conclusion that you're looking for.
Well, me, I'm always up to challenge myself to something new and different. And I doesn't matter if I'm scared, I'm gonna do it. It's just how do I do it? I guess it's like, okay, do I just go all in or do I just put my toe in just a little bit and see
Mm,
what happens? But mostly with me, it's always all or nothing
mm,
because you're right. What's the worst that could happen?
yep,
You never know if you're going to succeed at or fail at something if you never actually start it. So you actually got to get moving to get it done. So
exactly.
that's always been my thing. I never set a goal for something. I just say I'm going to do something and then I just go do it. And then afterwards, it's like I might write something down and say, I want to cook a recipe, never cooked this recipe before, and it's something that's on the top of my head, and I'm like, okay, well, let me put this together. And I'm like overthinking the whole process, but while I'm overthinking the process, I'm actually doing the steps to actually do the recipe, and
Yep.
then the finished result is always something that's enjoyable. And they're like, well, how'd you come up with this recipe? Don't know, it was just a thought in the head, so I just did it and you liked it, so it wasn't a failure. But I'm thinking in my head, oh my God, this stuff does not go together. Why are you putting it together? And then it turns out great. So I've never made a recipe that failed so far. So I guess I'm a decent kind of cook. So that's another passion of mine. So that was one of the things that helped me through my healing journey as well. And also just being honest with myself and telling myself what I needed to hear and not what I wanted to hear. And do you think that having people around you who will tell you the truth, no matter how hard it is, played a major part in you, in your growth, in your journey?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. It's really good to have a good circle of support around you,
Hmm.
obviously, that you can lean on, but can also be honest with you as well. Um,
Hmm.
it's very important to hear the truth. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but
Yeah.
over time, when you sort of remove that emotional part of it and
Yeah.
can hear the truth for what it is, you can obviously make very clear decisions based on that. So, yeah, I completely agree with that.
All right. Well, I'm not going to keep you anymore tonight, but if you are available, just know that I am going to drop your information in our group chat. So
Fantastic.
just be listening out or reading out, I guess you could say, because it'll be an email or a Facebook message or an Instagram message for you to appear on one of my other podcast sister shows. It has been an enjoyable conversation. Only other thing I can say is growth comes through pain,
Hmm.
and embrace the pain as it comes, but know that it gets better on the other side because you've grown into a different, more beautiful person on the other side. Is there anything you want to close with for our guest tonight? And then I'm going to say my closing line, and then you're going to have a great day because you're already on Friday. I can't let that go because my Friday is tomorrow.
No, look, I think you've summed it up really well. Without pain, there isn't any growth. That's very, very true. I think everyone will experience that in some way, shape, or form as they go through life. So as long as you can sort of embrace it, run through it, not run away from it, you're going to go a long way to having a successful existence. That's for sure.
All right. Well, I thank you. And I thank you all for tuning in tonight. And I cannot leave without saying this, and that is stay out of God's business. The only thing that He needs you to do is to be obedient to what He's called you to do. I thank you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.